Welcome, everybody. Next is the final round of Big Questions debate. We would like to, at this time, ask you to do something that is not traditional to watching a debate tournament. I would like you to take out your phones. You're all looking at me like, what is going on? There is a live polling element to this debate. Ooh, I know. If you would like to join, please take out your phones now and silence them first. Then text Big Q, B-I-G-Q, to 37607. Again, you will text Big Q, B-I-G-Q, to 37607. All capitals be great, no spaces. Again, that's 37607. $37607. You should receive a text message confirming that you have joined. Hopefully, that's everybody. Throughout the debate, there will be 4 questions texted to you. Respond via text message. Then you'll get a reply to your text with a link for you to follow the live results on your phone. Again, please make sure that your phone is silenced as you're doing this, but we encourage you to continue through the debate round. And once again, that is Big Q to 37607. Okay. Big Questions is a new debate format. It's supported by a generous grant from the John Templeton Foundation. Please, a round of applause to our generous sponsors. Teams that hold Big Question debates at a tournament with their teammates or in their classrooms receive grant awards to help fund their programs. In the school year of 2016 and 17, this past school year, the NSDA has infused over $350,000 into debate programs through the Big Questions grants, thanks to the John Templeton Foundation. Next year, the NSDA plans to award over $500,000 to schools, and we invite you to participate and host your own Big Question events at your schools, at your districts, or regional tournaments by checking out the NSDA website. And we are incredibly grateful once again to the Templeton Foundation for making this all possible. Before we begin, of course, as Dario Camara from Florida, I would like to thank my individuals who helped me in TAB this week, Ms. Sherry Bublitz of the wonderful state of New Mexico, and Ms. Marita Drusler from the wonderful state of Texas. Thank you very much. Although we work in connection with the John Templeton Foundation, we could not do any of this without the wonderful support of the National Speech and Debate Association and our 2 individuals that make this all possible, Ms. Katie Hines and Laura Burt of the National Office. Thank you very, very much. Okay. Now I would like to introduce our esteemed panel of judges. These judges are helping us award a $5,000 scholarship to the runner-up of this final round and a $10,000 scholarship to our national champion in Big Questions. Mr. Peter Paik, a 2-diamond coach from North Coast District. Miss Melissa Witt, a 2-diamond coach from the Tall Cotton District. Miss Lone Wen from the West Iowa District. Ms. Jasmine Neighbors of the Tar Heel East District. Ms. Florence Petit of the Florida Manatee District. Ms. Kelly Kirkpatrick, a first-timer at the national tournament from the Puget Sound District. And Ms. Lauren Robertson from the Birmingham City Schools that hosted us this week. And now we begin. You ready? Excited? All right. On the affirmative, Ms. Rebecca Roy from Watertown High School. And on the negative, Mr. Xavier Lewis from Lee's Summit North High School.
I would like to begin first by thanking my parents whose never-ending love and support has guided me through life and allowed me to participate in this activity. I love you and I can't thank you enough, and I would also like to thank my teammates. There's never a dull moment around you guys, and no matter how much we annoy each other, we always have each other's backs in the end. Thank you to my coaches who have shaped me into the competitor I am today. Ms. Voigt, who sparked my interest in debate and debate career and literally pushed me into the debate room because I was too afraid to walk in. Brett, for coaching me through this week and also being a friend and my emotional support. Mr. Walker, for always believing in me and showing me that hard work does pay off. And Mr. Downey, for secretly believing in me and reminding me not to sound stupid. Quick shout out to South Dakota Debate for providing every single round that has created the debater that is standing here today. And finally, I want to especially thank the NSDA and the Templeton Foundation for creating and funding this event. I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for any of these people that I've mentioned. I'm forever grateful. And with that, are my judges ready? I stand in affirmation of the resolution resolved. Science leaves no room for free will. For clarification, I'll provide the following definitions. Free will by Michael Hummer in 2009. Free will is thought to require two things: alternate possibilities and self-control that a person is free only if A, there is more than one future open to him and more than one course of action that he can perform, and B, he controls his own actions so of which the alternate possibilities are realized up to him. Science is a systematic study and structure of behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment, from Oxford Dictionaries. My resolutional analysis is that this resolution is asking whether or not science leaves room for free will. Therefore, the nugget must prove that first, with the realm of science, whether or not there is room for free will, and that whether or not free will fills that space. Which are contention one. Psychology proves through classical and opera conditioning that there's no room for free will. A, classical conditioning. DeAngelis in 2010 explains. In a study, Watson exposed a 9-month-old to a white rat and other furry objects, which the baby enjoyed to play with. As the baby played with the white rat, Watson would make a loud sound behind the baby's head. After a number of conditioning trials, Watson reintroduced the animals and furry items without the scary noise. Through the conditioning, the animals and objects that once were a source of joy and curiosity became triggers of fear, end quote. Classical conditioning is the idea that they create an involuntary response in a person by creating a connection between specific stimuli. By creating the connection between the scary noise and the furry objects, it made the baby cry and trigger fear. Once this becomes an instinct, the person no longer has control over this response, leaving no room for free will by definition. B, operant conditioning, as explained by Halbert and Co. for no date. In a typical conditioning response, it's followed by the consequences of which change the future possibilities of that response. Through the process called conditioned reinforcement, neutral stimuli associated with reinforcers can become reinforcers in their own right. The most common example of conditioned reinforcers is money. A piece of paper can motivate all sorts of behaviors in paper that previously has been associated with important reinforcers such as food, clothing, and so forth. Psychologists have used different types of token reward implement reinforcement involving the principles of conditioning reinforcement have been successful to use and alter behavior in schools, institutions, and hospitals, end quote. Operant conditioning is the idea that through material motivators, both indirect and directly, a person can be conditioned to act a certain way. Through positive and negative reinforcement, it creates a desired response using those reinforcers. By creating the connection between the reinforcers and the action, it makes people do certain behaviors in order to get the reward. 2, biology. A, scientists are able to manipulate and change choices through the use of dopamine. Howard Lee Gibbons Ginn in 2017. Rather than just being associated with it, a team of genetic engineers and molecular tools, including activating and inhibiting neurons with light in a technique called optogenetics to manipulate an animal's brain dopamine levels. They found that they were able to bidirectly switch a mice from one choice of a lever to another by increasing and decreasing dopamine levels. These results suggest dramatically changing dopamine levels are associated with ongoing selection of actions, end quote. What this is pointing out is that scientists are able to change choices in mice through the use of dopamine, meaning that there's no choice in the first place. This is significant because mice might have multiple possibilities, but they do not have the freedom to choose between those options because they will always pick the option that produces the most dopamine, making that the motivator of their actions. And looking back at the definition of free will, we need to see that animals have to have first the multiple possibilities, but also they do not have control over those options because they are motivated by dopamine. B, our brain gives us the illusion of choice when in reality we're just rewriting history. Griffin's in 2016. A new study builds on the works that says the brain rewrites history when it makes choices, changing our memories so that we believe that we wanted to do something before it even happened. In one of the studies undertaken by Adam Baer and Paul Bloom of Yale University, test subjects were shown 5 white circles on a computer monitor. They were told to choose the circles before one of them lit up red. Statistically, people should have picked the right circle 1 out of every 5 times, but they reported getting it right much more than 20% of the time, going over 30%, if the circle turned red very quickly. Scientists suggest that the findings show that test subjects' minds were swapping around the order of events so that it appeared that they had chosen the right circle, even if they didn't actually have time to do so, end quote. What this is pointing out is that people's brains have been conditioned so well that people are not even aware that their brains are switching around the results and rewriting history, meaning that a person does not actually have control over their actions, it's just an illusion, and that they're always going to take the option that produces the most dopamine because of the conditioning reinforcement that happens within our lives. With that, I urge an affirmative ballot.
You all set? Yep. All right. So before I give my speech, I'd actually like to give a few thank yous, if that's okay with everybody. All right. I'd first like to thank the National Speech and Debate Association for the opportunity to debate in such a fashion in which I've been able to explore my passion for philosophy and for bringing students like Rebecca and I together from all around the country. And next, I'd like to thank the John Templeton Foundation for supporting students in Big Question Debate and for allowing us the opportunity to delve deeper into this very compelling topic. On a more personal note, debating has resulted in my growth not only as a person, but also as a student. This is in large part due to my coach, Mr. Ben Jewell. Thank you, Mr. Jewell, he's backstage, for all you have done for me this year, whether it be roundtable discussions about topics or general speaking skills, or more recently for handling the stress throughout this very stressful week. You were the most influential factor during my journey to this stage. And lastly, I'd like to thank the love and support from my family, including my debate family sitting right up there, and how each of them believed and pushed me throughout this week. My mentors, Vance Kelly and Ike Okonkwo, helped me to realize my potential, while Taylor Crossley and Xander Davison actually encouraged me throughout this year. And just, again, to my parents, team, and coaches, thank you guys. All right. Now to begin my speech in negation on the resolution, I would start right about now. I am an artist and I have the ability and the free will to choose the way the world will envision me, Lady Gaga. And it is because I agree with Ms. Gaga that I reject the resolution resolved. Science leaves no room for free will. In order to better understand the resolution, I offer the following observations of the context and language of the resolution. Observation 1, science is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Science then includes the broad spectrum of academic studies in physics, biology, environmental systems, and the social sciences, all of which posit systematic study and test knowledge claims in academic communities in order to reach consensus about the fabric of both the physical and social spheres of knowledge. Observation 2, leaves no room is the evaluative term of the resolution and can be defined in this context as there being no possibility for free will to coincide with the concept of science. If the negative side can show any possibility for science and free will to coincide, the negative wins the debate. Observation 3, free will is defined by the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy as a particular sort of capacity of rational agents to choose a course of action from among various alternatives as a means of fulfilling some sort of desire. Given this interpretation of free will, as long as options are available and the agent choosing has the agent of choice has the ability to freely choose an option in order to fulfill a certain desire, that agent is displaying free will. We must reject this resolution because the scientific means of communicating ideas and free creation allow room for free will in a scientific world. The negative side does not reject the notion of determinism entirely, but accepts it in a smaller form, soft determinism, if you will. Science governs aspects of life, as does explain biological limits that we cannot overcome. Science revolves around the tenet of causation. The cause and effect relationship of the universe explains limits to our will, but does not disprove its existence. Soft determinism leaves room for some freely chosen action, but more importantly, it also accounts for certain aspects of the physical universe around us, the universe that influences us. The world influences us, but it does not restrict us, as we can see first in the very nature of scientific inquiry, and secondly in the scientific discipline of computational linguistics. In order to defend my interpretation of the resolution, I offer the following contentions. Contention 1, the scientific understanding of free will is not complete. Science, the all-encompassing body of knowledge, works by creating laws to explain phenomena of the natural world. Currently, there are no laws that adequately explain decision-making processes that also account for an active consciousness. Due to the lack of laws to explain the actions that lead us to question free will, we must further understand the role of natural laws in decision-making. Robert Kane of the Oxford University Press explains in 2005, don't confuse determinism with constraint, coercion, or compulsion. Constraint, coercion, and compulsion act against our wills, preventing us from doing or choosing what we want. By contrast, determinism does not necessarily act against our wills, nor does it always prevent us from doing what we want. It is a mistake to think that the laws of nature constrain us. People have a mistaken image of natural causes or laws of nature overmastering us, forcing us against our wills. But in fact, the existence of laws of nature indicates that only certain events follow others according to regular patterns. To be governed by the laws of nature is not to be in chains. The laws of nature do not prove humans to be automata, but explains the world around us and how it affects our decision-making in certain instances, not disproving free will. Stephen Cave further explains what it means to display free will. Stephen Cave, PhD of Cambridge University, explains, philosophers are used to talking about free will as if it is either on or off, but there might be another way of looking at human agency. Some scholars argue that we should think about freedom of choice in terms of our very real and sophisticated abilities to map out multiple potential responses to a particular situation. He goes on to explain, we should focus on our ability in any given setting to generate a wide range of options for ourselves and to decide among them without external constraint. It simply doesn't matter that these processes are underpinned by a causal chain of firing neurons. Free will and determinism are not the opposites they are often taken to be, they simply describe our behavior at different levels. Take into consideration the more in-depth explanation of what free will actually consists of, language exemplifies these circumstances. Contention 2, computational linguistics proves that the human expression of language is a source of free will. Leonard Schubert, professor of computer science at the University of Rochester, as well as member of the Center for Language Sciences and Center for Computation of the Brain, explains, computational linguistics is a scientific and engineering discipline concerned with understanding written and spoken language from a computational perspective. He goes on to explain, moreover, cognitive scientists who explore the human language faculty in detail all seem to reach the conclusion that the content derived from language is in large part symbolic. It is not hard to see, however, how raw intuition might lead to the meanings as images hypothesis. It appears that vivid consciousness is associated mainly with the visual cortex, especially area V1, which is also crucially involved in mental imagery. Any evoked imagistic artifacts become part of our conscious experience. Further, the very act of introspecting on what sort of imagery, if any, is evoked by any given sentence may promote construction of imagery and awareness thereof. What Schubert elucidates is that the computational study of language creation demonstrates deep features of human creativity which we control, enhance, change, and shape in order to freely communicate our picture of the world. The way we use language is completely explicable through science, and taking into consideration the definition of free will includes having the ability to choose different options at a given time. The infinite number of responses our mind can generate to allow us to effectively communicate our ideas proves not only the scientific nature of thought, but also the free will that ensues with it. Communication of free expressions of language between human beings, has allowed humans to create science, discover and inhabit every place on earth, invent civilization, art, change history, projecting our will in a way that demonstrates the complexity of freedom. Thus, I urge a strong ballot negation.
Judges ready? Okay. Opponent ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. First off, on your first contention, when you talk about philosophy and free will and this on and off gray area, is this a study or is this a philosophical theory?
It's actually a logical proof. My first contention again states the scientific understanding of free will is not complete, so it's actually explaining through logic why science cannot necessarily not leave room for anything that it's not actually can understand.
Okay, so
and with that, may I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Going off of your first contention where you explained that the psychology proves no room, is your entire contention based around the basis of social conditioning?
It's behavioral science.
Is it based on the social conditioning?
Yes.
Okay, do you have a question?
Okay, with your point, inside your whole entire case, do you actually use a scientific study proving that free will exists in the space that you've provided?
I actually don't use a study because the study would be too small. In comparison, I use a scientific discipline. The entire scientific discipline, such as neuroscience or biology, I use computational linguistics. And going off of your second contention where you explain that biology, your only use of biology, what exactly study do you use in subpoint B?
In the B point. It's the Bear and Bloom evidence from Yale University talking about how our brain is rewriting history and the events that we think that we're making the choice.
Do you know the exact methodology of this study?
What?
Do you know the exact methodology of this study?
What do you mean by that?
How did they find the results that they found?
They used brain scanners.
Do you know which brain scanners, like the EEG or the fMRI?
I mean,
Are you aware?
bring it up if you want me to. Or they pretty much were told to choose between it, and the scientists used the response that the people, like, they used brain scanners in order to decide when they made the decision, okay? And
so
then
the participants in the experiment were told to do something and then they did it?
yes, you need
that
control
disproves
in
free will?
order to have a scientific study.
It disproves free will because their participants in the experiment were told to do something and
They
they
had the
actually
choice
did
to do nothing, but they didn't.
The participants were told by scientists in
May
the
I have a
experiment.
question?
Yes, you may.
Okay, for your second contention talking about language equals free will, what do you mean that you can change the picture that you're involved in?
Actually, I never stated that you can change the picture you're involved in. My second contention explains computational linguistics. Again, computational linguistics is a scientific discipline focused on our ability to interact between each other and our ability to actually assign meaning to any given stimulus. Just like we can call this a desk or call this a piece of paper, we understand exactly what we're saying, and our ability to give an infinite number of responses to any given stimuli or to any given sentence, that actually
So how do we
explains free
learn
will.
that a thing is a desk or a thing is a piece of paper?
We're taught by our parents.
Okay, you can have a question if you want.
Going off of your second contention again of the subpoint A, exactly what do you mean by the altered dopamine? How does that disprove free will?
Specifically, what it shows is by changing and increasing the dopamine levels in the mice, they could change the response. So if they were going to lever B, they decreased the dopamine levels, and therefore they moved to lever A because it would create the most dopamine in that instance.
So your entire subpoint A is revolving around the basis that you can inject certain chemicals into your brain that will alter brain chemistry?
What the study is showing is it's not just, it's an exact causation between those two.
So
Like,
you're altering brain chemistry and that disproves free will? You're
it's-
altering the ability for the
It's
brain, you're
not the
altering the brain
altering
state?
of it, it's saying that when
But
you
you
are
stated that
making a
we-
choice, you will go towards the one that has more dopamine. They proved that by changing the dopamine levels in there to make sure that it
So
wasn't
when
just
you
a
change
causation.
when you change the dopamine levels, are you agreeing that the change in dopamine levels is a change in the brain state?
That's the end of prep. Do I
Could she answer that question?
I don't understand what you were asking,
that's fine.
sorry. Beginning prep now? And prep time at 2:01. Oh gosh. Brief roadmap, I'm just going to attack the negative side of the flow. Judges ready? Okay. First off, what we need to look at is first observation. We've pretty much agreed on the same definition of science, so this needs to be pulled through. The scientific, or the exact same definition of science is the systematic study or structure of behavior, the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. This is important in this round because he's only showing that through the philosophical sites that are not actually observed or experimented on, that you can't actually hold this as science. They're philosophical and theory are completely different things. He needs to use science in order to prove that there is room for free will, and also that free will fills that space. That's the burden of the resolution on his side. Secondly, he talks about the leaves no room, and that means there's zero possibility. What we need to see is first, he can show that there's as much room as he possibly wants, but the fact is until he fills that room with free will, he has not met the burden on the negative side. He needs to specifically show how free will fills the space in between that. For now on, we can see that the space that he's provided could be filled up with randomness using quantum mechanics theory. So we need to see that he needs to prove that why that space that he's provided is not random and that it is actually free will that is happening. On his third point, talking about the rational choice and that we need to choose between many options, what we need to see is the person who is making the choices between these actual options needs to have actual control. If you're given the option of going down road A and going down road B, but your influences are so wrong that are so influential that you would never go down road B, you don't actually have multiple possibilities. You will always choose road A. Therefore, we need to see that the person needs to actually have control over what road they're going to take, and he has to prove that that's actually going to happen. Secondly, on his causation links does not prove existence. What we need to see is that science is what the resolution is asking us to use. So all of his indictments specifically on the study of science doesn't actually hold through because both of us have to use scientific knowledge in order to justify our responses. So his science is just as flawed as my science. The fact is he has to show specifically that free will is filling up that space. On his first contention, talking about science is not complete, and we talk about the natural laws, and that these the patterns within society, what we need to see is that he's only looking at a theory. He's looking at the scientific theory he's using the philosophy based behind this, and that he's not actually proving anything. He's just creating doubt. He has not shown why the doubt that he has created is specifically for free will. That's what the resolution is asking for us to do. He has to prove that in order to even get close to getting the ballot. What we need to see is this philosophy equals free will in this gray area that he talks about. First, we need to see that this is not actually proven. He doesn't prove it. He doesn't back it by science. He just brings out the theory and says that this is a possibility of this happening. He can't just create doubt. You have to hold the negative accountable in the fact that they also have to have a side of the resolution. They also have to have a world within this. He needs to prove that his world has free will within it. Secondly, on with his language equals free will, and he talks about the consciousness, what we need to see is I could teach my child that a desk is actually called a piece of paper. The fact is our influences cause us to do certain things. What our parents teach us, what our teachers teach us, what environment we are grown up in is how we decide what we are going to do, what paths we are going to take. The fact is I've clearly shown through scientific studies that dopamine is a direct influence with whatever decision you are going to make, because whatever increases the most dopamine is what you are going to choose, and that through conditioning that you are actually influenced by your background sources, therefore leaving no actual choice within these decisions. You're given multiple possibilities, but you don't actually have a choice because you always choose road A over road B because you've been first operately conditioned or classically conditioned, or it creates the most dopamine, and that your brain will rewrite history in order to think that you have the illusion of free will. Therefore, leaving no room for free will meeting the burden on the affirmative side.
All right, you all set?
Yep.
Are the judges all ready? All right, then let's boogie. To better understand my firm stance in negation, let's first look at the flaws in my opponent's case. My opponent argues in her observation of free will from actually one person, Michael Hummer. She explains that there's alternate possibilities, and she goes on to explain further that you have to be able to control your actions. And although I agree with this definition, it actually flows right back to mine. My definition from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy not only encompasses this definition, but it takes it one step further when it explains that it has to be as a means fulfilling some sort of desire. So not only should we use my definition in today's debate because it encompasses hers, but it also provides more clarity for the round. That's why we should use my definition of free will in today's debate. Going to her first contention, she explains that psychology proves that there is no free will. To explain this, she actually uses 2 subpoints, both of them about conditioning. The first one about social conditioning. In response to social conditioning, I would actually contend that social conditioning does in fact leave room for free will, because social conditioning are external constraints, any of which can be identified through education or experience. All the social sciences are based on identifying social conditioning. It's extremely powerful in limiting free will, I agree, but that doesn't mean that it disproves free will. It still leaves room for a free agent to act against the stimulus. So as long as, even though social conditioning is apparent, you can still act against the stimulus, proving that free will can coincide. So this is exemplified by those that act outside the norm, or weirdos, we would call them, or people that don't actually necessarily act along with the social conditioning they're provided with. The education of this very literature, such as free will, is a point of social conditioning, which actually increases or exacerbates our ability to understand and our personal autonomy, exacerbating free will, because we are able to, through social conditioning, I didn't know anything about free will or science. My coach told me about this, and I can actually understand, not only I can understand this, not because he told me this, but because he gave me a basic understanding that lead me to my ability to actually act upon my own control to further my understanding. So going on to her second subpoint, subpoint B about operant conditioning, she explains that there are motivating factors, and she explains that money motivates. But again, free will, my definition explains, free will is the ability to choose a course of action from among various alternatives as a means of fulfilling some sort of desire. So as long as you are fulfilling a sort of desire while you have options available to you, you are displaying free will. So if money is a motivator, money would be that fulfilling that desire that you're actually trying to, proving the definition of free will, proving the scientific method proves free will, leaving room for it. So going on to her second contention about biology, she explains through biology, her first subpoint is about the altered dopamine levels in rats and how you would always go to whichever one fulfills your dopamine levels. But this argument is actually basing around the point that chemical changes alter brain chemistry. In responses, I like to point out that chemistry can be altered. That's like the use of alcohol and drugs, but that still leaves plenty of room for free will. You may not have as much control, but the root problem of this situation is basically the chicken or the egg problem. We can take pictures and analyze the brain, but we cannot know what causes synapses to fire. We can't know if the chemicals are affecting our will, if our will is causing the neurons to fire. Two people with the exact same brain chemistry can act in very different ways based on any number of factors. Another place where science cannot know the interaction, where science cannot know, there is room for free will. So when she explains that you always go to the altered dopamine levels, you're actually changing the brain state, changing the person. And she actually explained her definition of her definition of free will, that person must have control of his actions. And you cannot necessarily have control of your actions if you're changing the brain state, you're changing the person. So going on to her second subpoint, their subpoint B explains that you have the illusion of choice and because of your lack of awareness. But again, I would contend that just because the problem that she brings up is within the methodology of the study she provides to explain this argument. The problem is within the methodology of the study because it measures electrical and chemical readings in the brain, not necessarily uncaused actions such as our ability to immediately resolve a sentence through computational linguistics, a source of free will, or make a decision while driving. Because our reaction time is so minute, you cannot necessarily take this study into account in actual uncontrolled environments. This study focuses directly on a controlled environment. When someone is told to do something, the participant is told to do something by the scientists perform the experiment, so they do it. The result is a logical explanation, not necessarily disproving the notion of free will, and for all these reasons, I urge you a strong ballot negation.
Judges ready? Opponent ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. On your attack talking about how your coach taught you things, how do you know what is right and what is wrong?
What exactly are you asking me?
Like, how do you know when you're doing something that is considered right, and how do you know when you're doing something that's considered wrong?
Are you asking me a question about morality, our moral decision making?
Sure.
Well, I would actually contend that that's based on our environment again. And again, actually, throughout my case, I explained in the point about self-determinism that many things are based on our environment, but that does not necessarily disprove free will. It only limits our free will. So as long as science leaves some room for free will, the negative side wins the debate. And with that, I ask you another question.
Yep.
Going off of your attack to my computational linguistics argument, you actually explained through social conditioning again, right? Was that your attack to social conditioning?
What contention was that?
My second contention, computational linguistics proves the human expression of language is a source of free will.
Yes, I used behavioral science in order to disprove the fact that you are taught things and you can teach people different things, and the fact is like this is not an inherent.
Is every word and every construction of a sentence you've ever made been taught to you by someone?
Yes.
Every word you've ever heard has been taught to you directly by someone?
Unless you're making up your own language.
And can you make up words?
I mean, you can make up noises.
Can you make up words?
Sure, if you
So if
call
you
it
can
a
make
word.
up words, who taught you those words that have been made up?
You're acting randomly at that point.
You're acting randomly. Is that not displaying free will?
No, because
Uncaused
random by
action is not free
definition
will.
means you don't have control.
Random does not mean you do not have control. Random is uncaused action. Is free will not uncaused action? Would you agree with that?
What do you mean?
It's free will and cause action.
It's action that is freely done by an agent.
And are you not freely not freely able to make a decision based on, understanding that
But
you
you
just
have to
stated
have
that you can make a
control
new...
over what action you are doing.
Do
Random
you
by
not have control
definition
over
means you
making
do
a
not
new
have
word?
control over it. May
Are
I
you
have a
stating-
question?
Right after you answer, are you stating that you don't have control over making a new word?
You don't have control over randomness, is what I am stating.
You can ask your question.
Okay, with your attack on my dopamine evidence, are you just saying that this is because we're changing the chemicals within the brain? That's the only reason it doesn't work?
It's altering the brain state, yes.
Okay. You can have a
Do you
question.
have another? Okay. Going back to what we were just talking about, actually, again, what would you actually explain what would you explain free will to be? Not necessarily through your definition, but in your own words. What is free will?
Being able to choose without outside influences, you're coming up with it on your own, and you are aware that you are making that decision.
And is making your own word or creating a new word not doing that?
It is a random action. You are randomly putting around noises and then calling it a word.
What about the use of like a new painting or art? How exactly can that be explained through science?
Random.
It's random. So
It
art
is
random.
randomness. Yes.
So art, music, film, anything, word, computational linguistics, everything is
It
just
is,
directly
it is
random.
either taught through conditioning, or you've been taught through your environment, or it is a random action that you are creating.
Did someone teach Picasso how to make the paintings he made? Or did someone teach Da Vinci?
He was conditioned to act and express himself in that
So he
way.
had no ability to control how he expressed himself through the art? Is that what you're stating?
He's been
Michelangelo
conditioned
had
to
no ability to
express in
control
that
him?
certain way.
Okay. Do you have a question?
It's the end of prep.
Okay, thank you.
Or end. Start prep now. End prep at a minute 46. Okay, brief roadmap. I'm going to go over the main points of the round. Judge ready? Judges ready? Opponent ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. First off, we need to look at what the resolution is asking for us to answer. Does science leave room for free will? First, we need to see that he has used no scientific studies to prove specifically that free will fills the space that is happening. He's not even meeting the first burden on the negative side. Secondly, we need to see that he's not using science anywhere in his theories. His whole entire case is non-scientific. It is a philosophical, theory-based case. The only indictment he has is that science inherently has some kind of flaw or room for it, but he doesn't show that science proves that that room is actually filled by free will. Therefore, he's still not meeting the second burden of the resolution on his side. Secondly, we need to look at the influence also we need to see that the affirmative side is the only one giving you scientific, concrete evidence whether or not that free will does not exist. I've clearly shown through the dopamine study, which his only argument has said is that we're changing the brain chemistry, but I read in the very first sentence, rather than just being associated with it, the team of genetic engineers and molecular tools manipulated a brain's dopamine levels. What we need to see see is that they manipulated these levels in order to make sure that it was a direct cause in the decision-making that is happening. That's the only reason that the manipulation was happening, so therefore it created the link showing that dopamine is what causes you to change those decisions. We need to pull that through. So secondly, we need to see the influence argument. We need to see that he is only showing that there are multiple roads. I am showing specifically through reinforcement and through the use of biology that we will always choose road A because we have been influenced to do so. We've only been taught to choose road A, or road A will always produce the most dopamine. We have no actual possibility of going down road B because we will never do that because we've been conditioned in order to always choose road A. He needs to prove that first we would actually be able to choose between road A and road B, and it's too late for him to bring up new scientific knowledge in this instance. He needs to use the evidence that he has, and he has yet to disprove the fact that you would be able to choose road B over road A. And lastly, we need to look at the biology of this scientific studies. We need to see specifically, I am the only one in this whole entire round who has brought up multiple scientific studies showing that first, behaviorally, we are conditioned in order to make certain decisions through operant and classical conditioning. Classical conditioning creates an involuntary response in the person, meaning that the person does not have control when they are associated with that specific stimuli. Operant conditioning is the use of reward implementation. For primary and secondary needs, you use this reinforcement in order to get a person to do a desired result. They don't have control over that because they are trying to get this primary need that they are wanting. And then we can look at the dopamine level and the rewriting history. It's showing that this illusion of free will that all of us are having, even though this sounds terrible, is just our brains rewriting and mixing up the history that we are actually presenting. I know the affirmative side sounds like it's wrong, but current science is specifically showing that we do not have room for free will no matter how much we want to actually believe in it. Therefore, I urge an affirmative ballot.
And are you all set? Okay. Are the judges ready? All right, then let's begin. First, I'd like to talk about the resolution again. The resolution states, science leaves no room for free will. And again, my opponent is offering the interpretation that the resolution means that we need to look at a specific study. But again, a study would be too small because the discipline or the computational linguistics argument of my second contention actually in my case, which she says, I guess I don't have any science. But the computational linguistics, again, the first sentence of that argument states, computational linguistics is a scientific and engineering discipline concerned with understanding written and spoken language from a computational perspective and building artifacts that usefully process and produce language, either in bulk or in a dialogue setting. So it is a scientific discipline. She states that I need to have a study, but that study would be false or would be too small in comparison to this actual discipline encompassing many and many studies. So going off of that, her only attack on my case was basically that I don't provide science, which I just refuted. So next, she attacked my Kane card in my first contention where it explains that the laws of nature are not necessarily constraint on our free will. And her attack on this was basically explaining that it's not proving anything and it's not backed by science, but again, I just proved that computational linguistics is backed by science, or not necessarily backed by science, that would be a logical fallacy. Computational linguistics is science. So going off of that, the next one, again, the randomness argument she explains, but again, randomness is appropriate. I mean, randomness I would explain would be appropriate action that we can see through like the use of no cause. I mean, randomness would be the ability that, would be the conception that something doesn't necessarily have a cause that we are aware of, not necessarily that something that does not have a cause. So when she explains randomness, it really has no correlation to my case or necessarily the resolution in today's debate. So going off of that, her attack on my computational linguistics argument was basically social conditioning and dopamine. And I've already attacked the refutation against social conditioning, and I've already attacked her refutation against dopamine. So just going on to explain what computational linguistics is, maybe she just doesn't understand it. Computational linguistics is the act of assigning meaning, which is appropriate uncaused action. Free will, uncaused action. Scientific discipline, proving uncaused action, proving free will. Looking at social science's spectrum of human culture and expression across the globe holds constant the structured but willful active creation of meaning. From the negative perspective of the resolution, social sciences show continuities of the limits of free will because of culture. I agree. The limits of, free will is limited because of culture, but is not disproven or left no room for it. So going off of that, but our interaction with the world and others creates creative expressions of meaning, which would not vary as they do without some level of free will. In other words, if humans acted as other biological systems act, such as like plants and environmental systems, systems, human cultures would be more or less identical, but they are not. We can actually all agree with that. Therein lies the room for free will, which is also the engine of social change, which we may witness as a historical change that recreates our social world in every epoch. We can see that although we are socially conditioned, or there are certain limits to our free will because of our culture or because of our surroundings, that does not necessarily disprove the existence of free will or disprove the ability for science and free will to coexist. Because again, the resolution states science leaves no room for free will. She must prove that there is absolutely no possibility for free will and science to coincide. And I've actually already proven that because free will, by definition, is the ability to choose a course of action from among various alternatives, and scientific discipline of computational linguistics proves you have an infinite number of responses to any given stimulus. That's actually proving free will through scientific intercourse. And for that, I urge you a strong ballot in negation. Thank you.
I'll use prep time starting now. Okay, and prep time. Are my judges ready? Opponent ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm just going to go over the main points of this round. First off, we need to look at the resolutional debate and the definition debate. He's tried to prove and show that he has to just show that there is room for free will within this existence. But specifically, the resolution says for free will because it wants the negative to prove that free will is what fills that space. Remember in my very first speech where I said, until he proves that free will fills that space, we should just put randomness in it until we actually know what is actually filling it. He has yet to prove anything. His only scientific study on his second contention just says that it can't disprove the existence of free will. It does not say that it proves the existence of free will within that space. This is important in the round. He has to prove that science shows specifically that there's room for free will. Randomness is not free will because by definition you don't have control over it. If I flip a coin, I don't have the control on whether or not it's going to land heads or whether or not it's going to land tails. The fact is that it is a random event that I don't have control over. Secondly, we need to look at this study is too small evidence. He says that his one study that he talks about is has a bunch of different scientific knowledge within it. That's why I don't bring up just one study. I've shown multiple instances through behavioral science and conditioning, and also through biology with the use of dopamine and how our brain rewrites history and rewrites the order of events in order to give us the illusion that that we have free will. What we need to see is that for the fairness of debate, the negative has to at least prove something. He cannot just prove doubt on the affirmative side. He has to have a world in and of himself. Therefore, we need to see that the negative has not proven anything. He's just created doubt in the affirmative. The affirmative has clearly answered all of the doubt that he has created through scientific studies, which is what the resolution is asking for. So on the fairness of the debate, we need to see that the negative has not shown that first, that there is scientific knowledge saying that free will is what's filling that space. Secondly, he hasn't even used science to create the space that he is providing. He's only using theories and he has no scientific backing. And with that, I urge an affirmative ballot.
Like it. All right, are all the judges ready? And is my opponent ready?
Yes.
All right, then let's begin. So throughout this speech, I'll just be going over the arguments you should take into consideration and why you should vote during today's round. And they just all happen to be in the favor of negation. So first, in my opponent's last speech, she explained that when you flip a coin, again, flipping a coin, the outcome may be random, but the outcome also has nothing to do with human agency or conscious deliberation. But the action of flipping the coin is based on human deliberation and human agency and conscious deliberation and your ability to choose to flip that coin, proving free will. So going off of the resolution again, the resolution states science leaves no room for free will. When it states science leaves no room for free will, let's just look at it in a grammatical sense. Science, first being the body of knowledge, leaves no room being the ability to, leaves no room meaning that there's no possibility for them to coincide, and free will being the ability to choose a course of action from among various alternatives. So science being a body of knowledge, you must be able to prove through knowledge or prove through the scientific method free will to exist or the ability to choose a course of action to exist. And I've actually done that through the use of computational linguistics. But before I get to computational linguistics, I'll look at another aspect of, in the argument today. So she explains that my study pales in comparison to her studies. But again, I'd like to point out that we wouldn't consider biology a study, and we wouldn't consider psychology a study, and nor should we consider linguistics a study. Linguistics or computational linguistics is a scientific discipline. A discipline encompasses many and many different types of studies. So again, not my one study may pale in comparison to her studies, but again, I don't have any studies. I have a scientific discipline proving many different studies. So going off of that, computational linguistics is our ability to choose a course of action. Our computational linguistics is our ability to communicate effectively with other people and the ability to understand the natural world around us and our ability to explain what we feel about the natural world around us. We have an infinite number of responses we can attract to any given stimulus. And our infinite number of responses are to any given sentence. Like, you can say anything to me and I can say anything to you. That chooses that I have an infinite number of responses I can give to any course of action, to any given sentence. And because of that scientific discipline based on computing linguistics, that scientific discipline proves free will. Thank you.
Good luck.